Part two of our sit down with Coach Don Patterson. Appreciate Don being with us. And we've covered a lot. If you missed our segment yesterday, check it out here on the channel. Before we get into a couple more distinct topics, including some predictions for the show, we'll see how in-depth Don wants to get as far as predictions. I want to thank Iowa Floor Covering down in Bondurant. Check out their many options on flooring, tile showers, carpet, tile flooring. Trust me, you'll get great service with Tyler, Ryan, and the guys down in Bondurant, right in the heart of central Iowa. And Iowa Floor Covering is a proud supporter of the work being done here at From the Hawkeye of the Storm. And this podcast is made possible because of Iowa Floor Covering. Visit iowafloorcovering.com for more information. They can help you with your next big project. So, Coach Don Patterson's with me. I want to talk more about explosive plays. We ended our segment yesterday on this topic, Don. And Phil Parker is clearly one of the best in the business at eliminating or at least limiting big plays. But last week against Nebraska, Iowa did give up a big play on a 3rd and 11 against a basically third-string quarterback in Chubba Purdy, who's been playing better, but has not had the acumen for making a bunch of big plays through the air. How did that happen? If anybody missed our post-game show, how did that happen last week, and how do you think Phil Parker responds to that gaffe?
Well, I think Phil would be the first to tell you that was a poor decision on his part to do what he did. And just to take the listeners back into that game situation, 3rd and 11, and we decided we're going to present like we might be bringing pressure. You might recall that both safeties were down in a threatening position as if they're going to come. And it was all just to try to throw Nebraska off their game. On the snap, we did not bring a free safety. Those guys dropped into coverage. But the mistake we made on that play, they both looked for the nearest receiver to double. I believe it was 3-by-1, as I recall. We had trips on the right side, and the touchdown was to the number 2 receiver, the middle of those 3 receivers. And the safety that dropped out to the side of the trips simply looked for that inside receiver. He was bracketed, but we had single coverage on both those outside receivers. And the one that got toasted, of course, was Deshaun versus the number 2 receiver, who did have good speed, of course. On the other side, the other safety, or maybe it was, more I think about it, it might have been Castro, I think. I'm not sure personnel-wise who was in that position. But whoever it was, he dropped out and looked for the receiver to his side of the field rather than to the opposite side of the field. And when the ball was in the air, of course, he reacted to it. He almost made a play on the guy, but he couldn't quite get there either. And as a result of that, we gave up a huge touchdown. We don't give up 66-yard plays hardly ever, but we did. And we were just trying to get too cute. In 3rd and 11, we were trying to get too cute with what we were doing. We were trying to make them think we might be checking. The listener might wonder, why would we do that? Well, if they thought it was going to be pressure, they might check into a shorter throw, and then we simply would, after they caught the ball, if they did, we'd simply react up and tackle them and make them punt. You see that all the time. You know, in the NFL, if you're looking at 3rd and 10, they're going to try to force you into throwing the ball well short of the first down marker and then simply tackle you. And that's what we were trying to do at the time, but we were not sound over the top. So in that same situation, of course, Deshaun logically would have played further off the ball and been able to defend better to the post than what he was.
I reflect back, Don, on a game earlier this year against Western Michigan. Iowa gave up several big plays to Western Michigan. And that was not a game you'd expect Phil Parker's defense to kind of look vulnerable, but they did at times. And I remember saying after that game, I bet they have that cleaned up. And they played Penn State the next week, and they gave up 0 explosive plays. Penn State ran 97 plays and dominated that game. There's no question about it, but not a single explosive play given up. Now, I'm not saying we're going to see a repeat of that this Saturday, but I'll double down on my stance back in September. I think the fact that they gave up a big play on Friday against Nebraska, the way in which it was done, even though Cooper's gone, I would guess that almost pays dividends for Iowa, because I would think that's going to be an area of further emphasis, even if it was just maybe a play calling screw up or gaffe. I have trust in Phil. That's going to get cleaned up. And if they don't allow explosive plays on Saturday, say they can get away with 1 or 2 explosive plays in the game, even that seems like a lot for this Iowa defense to give up. How much does that change the game? Do you think Michigan is, I mean, obviously they've got Blake Corum and Edwards, but I mean, are they a team that needs an explosive play or 2? Obviously they're very good in explosive plays offensively.
Well, they're certainly above average on explosive plays. They're much better than we are on explosive plays. And yet it's not easy for them either to put up a lot of points unless they do have some chunk plays. If we can eliminate or close to elimination play, that's certainly a big step in finding a way to slow them down and leave them with a lesser point total than what they might need.
All right, I want to talk a little bit about the game as it relates to the first quarter. Last time these two teams played in the championship game in 21, I remember one of the key analytics you stated on this very show was that, hey, Iowa needs to get off to a quick start offensively, get on the board first. In fact, that year, in those 13 regular season games, if you include the Big Ten championship, Michigan scored first in every single game. Is that analytic as important based on what you looked at this year for Iowa to get on the board first this Saturday?
No, it's not. Okay. This team is different than the one 2 years ago. You're right. I do remember that vividly. The comment I made is you got to move heaven and earth to try to score first. Because if you can't score first, it's going to be so foreign to them. It's going to be worth more than just the first points that went on the board. It's going to carry a lot of dividends, and we weren't able to do it, of course. But if we would have been, I think it might have made some difference in the game. We'll never know, of course. But this year it hadn't really happened that way. Let me check real quickly. First points. Just to give you an idea, I don't mind sharing this with you because that's one of the analytics I look at is who scored first. First points, Michigan only scored first in 5 of the 9 games. We scored, I should say not us, but the team that won the game scored first in 8 of our 9 games. It's no secret. Since we struggle to put up points, it really has a lot of value to us if we can score first. In Michigan's case, it hadn't been that big a deal. 4 out of 9 times, the Big Ten opponent that's common to our opponents scored first and still lost the game. Michigan came back and beat them anyway. So it's not as critical now. And I guess the negative side of that means if we score first, it won't be any big deal to Michigan because other teams have done it to them also, and they've always reeled them in. I'd still like to score first and find out if that's still the case. But it is interesting that it doesn't apply this year like it did 2 years ago.
Most important player in this game for Iowa, Don?
Well, that's tough. You might not want to hear it, I guess, but I think I might have to say Deacon.
Wow. Okay, I was not expecting that. But that's fair. He's a quarterback.
Yeah, there's only 2 people that touch the ball on every play. 2 on offense, I should say. But I guess none on defense touch it every play, do they? We can only wish they did. But only 2 players touch it on offense, and the one throwing's got more to do with the outcome of the game than the one snapping.
Tory Taylor did not have his best game last week. Averaged close to 42 yards per game. That was a cold football and a cold day in Lincoln. And I would expect Drew Stevens, who he is dealing with a groin issue right now, an injury, but he is kicking. He is practicing. Sounds like he's looked pretty good this week. He's going to be kicking on Saturday. Don, it ain't going to be no Marshall meter. And Marshall had his moments. I'm sure Marshall's going to be ready to go if he needs to be. But I hope fans give Drew the respect and the chance he deserves because he's been really good. And he struggled last couple of weeks. But, kicking I would think is going to be huge. Iowa's got to win. Like, if you can't win, obviously not going to win. I don't think any of us anticipate Iowa, the offense, outcompeting the Michigan defense. But if Iowa's defense can at least break even with Michigan's offense, Iowa special teams has to control things, I think. I mean, Tory's got to have a big day. And I would anticipate, I made the statement earlier this week, indoors, Lucas Oil Stadium, it's going to be warmer in there. Wind is not going to be a factor. I would think that would help Tory Taylor and Drew Stevens get back on track. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're right. And I do think it's critical. Just remind you the same thing we've always said. A game is 3 games within one. Our offense versus their defense, our defense versus their offense, and then kicking game versus kicking game. We've made a habit of winning 2 out of 3. And that's all you have to do is win 2 out of 3. You can lose the other matchup, as we often do, and yet we still win the game because you win the other 2. It'll be a challenge. It'll be a huge challenge for our offense to win the day versus their defense. No one expects that to happen, but there are a lot of people that have faith in our defense and suspect maybe we can win that matchup. That's no guarantee, of course, because Michigan's good on offense. And then maybe we can also win the matchup of kicking versus kicking. To get that done, we have to be perfect on all placements that we have a reasonable expectation to make. And I define that as any PAT or field goal up to 50 yards. That's how reliable we've been in the past. That's how reliable we need to be on Saturday. That's a little bit of pressure for our place kicker, I guess, but that goes with the territory. And furthermore, every time we trade punts, we have to pick up yardage. I don't care how good the other guy is. Torrey's got to be better. Torrey has to have one of his best days ever. Is that doable? Absolutely. We're indoors. And he's been disappointed, I'm sure, with a couple of his games because they were still good, but they were not good by his standards. So it is critical that he have his usual outstanding performance, and it's also critical that Drew did the same thing from a kicking standpoint.
Really busy week for all of us, Don, but if I get the time, I'm going to be publishing a video here in the next day or two that's going to be entitled What If? Meaning, what if Iowa does this or Iowa does that? And let me give you a couple, Don. What if Caden Weegan pops off a kick return for a touchdown this week? What if Caden Weegan pops off a punt return for a touchdown this week? Like something we don't expect to have happen. I know, a lot of people, they feel like, all of a sudden, because Cooper's out, you have this disadvantage on punt returns. I think Caden Weegan is capable. We did see him fumble one here. Was it last week or the week before? But we've seen him, especially on kickoffs. The dude's got decent kick return vision, it appears to me. He's got good speed. Like, that could change a game. Imagine if he takes one back on the first drive. And I know the kick return game has kind of went away, and I don't like that. I wish it was more part of college football. But with the new fair catch rules and everything, kickers, and obviously where they're placed on the field, they're able to kick into the end zone much easier. But, that's one. What if Marco Lainez trots out there for a few plays? Like, that's something that, Don, I wish we would see on Saturday. I've been calling for it for at least the last month because he's going to be able to redshirt. He has saved his year. He can play in every game, whether it be the championship game or a bowl game, whatever. He could play any number of snaps and still hang on to this year of eligibility. What do you think, Don, about the idea of Brian and John Budmeyer having something ready for Marco Lainez, even if it's just 3 or 4 plays? I would just think, I know it's a more of a complex game than maybe I'm making it out to be, but wouldn't that catch Michigan off guard and make a statement, especially if Iowa threw out Marco Lainez in the first quarter of the game? Like, I would think that would kind of sideswipe, blindside the Michigan coaching staff.
Well, here's the truth. If Marco went on the field and you're over on the Michigan sideline, do you really have any idea what the play might be?
Exactly.
At this point, you really don't. I mean, Deacon can throw the ball down the field, so we certainly wouldn't put Marco out there just to try to throw one over him. No. We might not. That's a possibility. But it's no secret that Marco's a better runner, so is it possible he's out there simply to execute some aspect of the running game? That's a possibility, too. The bottom line, it's going to force Michigan to spend some time discussing what Lainez's purpose might be. I'm talking about maybe at halftime. If we do it in the first half, it's going to be a little bit of a topic of discussion at halftime, provided that play had good productivity in the first half, 1 or more plays. So here's a possibility. And getting back to Weegan, you've heard me say before, I like Weegan on kickoffs because he understands you have to take the ball and you have to attack the coverage unit. You have to go without hesitation down the field. He does that. I do recall, too, this is after our punt returner got injured. somebody on the team, I can't remember who it was, but somebody said, "You wait. Widget is a guy that's waiting to explode on a big return." Somebody on the team said that. I don't know where I heard it, but somebody said it to some reporter. And I remember thinking, you know what? He might be right, because Widget understands, again, you have to be a little bit fearless. In that regard, he does remind me a little bit of Tim Dwight, or a little bit of number 3 also, who was fearless. We wish we had number 3 back, but we don't.
You missed number 16 that played at Iowa as well.
Number 16.
Charlie Jones.
Charlie Jones. How could I forget Charlie Jones? Another great example. Here's the point that you're relating to, Corey. What if we get a non-traditional touchdown? There are so many ways to score other than just the typical offensive players doing it. Maybe it's a kick returner, punt returner. Maybe it's one of those 11 guys on defense. It might be something as simple as a strip sack where a guy runs it in. That happens. It might be an interception, of course, a more traditional way of scoring. I'll say this: if we intercept, you've always heard me say, the beauty of staying on the field of play and not getting funneled off the field, work toward a sideline. That's true. Look for a good path down the field, but don't get funneled out of bounds, because let's face it, those 5 offensive linemen are going to be hard pressed to tackle anybody in the open field. And the quarterback's not a very good tackler either. Maybe McCarthy is. I don't know. I'd like to find out. So the point is it any wonder that we might return it for a touchdown if we can get our hands on it? It's happened any number of times through the years.
And Iowa has forced less turnovers this year than a typical Phil Parker defense would. And although Cooper's not a part of this, there are guys across the field that have proven, hey, they've still got a knack for creating turnovers, making picks, returns. I think about Joe Evans a year ago at Ohio State with a strip sack recovery for a touchdown. We saw Quinn Schulte get an interception. Was that last week or week before? Sebastian Castro, we've seen him make big plays, including some pick sixes. We've seen Xavier Wampel a year ago in the bowl game with a pick six against Kentucky. We've seen Jamari Harris a couple of years ago against Nebraska with an interception. Deshaun Lee has been close a time or two, and he's only played in a few games. So I agree with you, Don. I know that's sometimes a lot to ask for, but if you can get at least one unconventional touchdown, it changes the game.
You're right. Non-traditional touchdown. Absolutely. No doubt about it. It can be the difference in the game. Let me give an example that our fans are not aware of, and Michigan fans haven't forgotten about it, though. We got to go back to not earlier this season, but go back to last season. I want you to think back to TCU versus Michigan. You remember that TCU won the game. The score you might have forgotten. It was 51-45. Here's the part I'm sure you've forgotten. I'll tell you now. Guess who had not one but 2 pick sixes in that game? The Horned Frogs did. It can make the difference in a game. It did last year, a year ago against TCU. We can only hope we'd be lucky enough to get 2. Right now, to be honest with you, I'd settle for 1.
Straight from the man cave, Kinnick Under the Kitchen, authentic, original player artwork is being drawn up for Hawkeye fans everywhere. Locally made prints of stars wearing the black and gold from the past, present, and future. How about current Hawkeye superstars Cooper DeJean and Torrey Taylor? Legends of the past like Jack Campbell, Spencer Lee, and Tim Dwight. Plus future phenoms like Aaron Graves. There are so many options available. They make great gifts, and your purchase benefits the Hawkeye athletes wearing the black and gold. Visit Under the Kitchen on Facebook or at Under the Kitchen's new website. That's underthekitchen.square.site. Again, that's underthekitchen.square.site. Check out Under the Kitchen today and get your authentic, original Hawkeye print.
And J.J. McCarthy may have played his best game so far this year last week against Ohio State. He was just really good. Where do you see, if any, weaknesses on tape from J.J. McCarthy? Is there anything? Obviously he's mobile. He's a guy who can make all the throws. He's a 5-star quarterback for a reason. He took Cade McNamara's job from him for a reason. Is there any signs of weaknesses or places where maybe he's vulnerable?
I haven't really studied him in all the games, but I do remember this off and on at different times. There were times he plays with great confidence, and I'm sure the Michigan fans appreciate that he has supreme confidence in what he can do. But sometimes that confidence can get trouble too. And a simple example that comes to mind, I know there's a time or two this year where for sure he's thrown the ball back against the grain. You know what I mean against the grain. Just envision a quarterback sprinting to his right and being chased, and yet he throws the ball back inside, back toward the middle of the field, and he's actually gotten by with it a time or two. Obviously, when he's throwing back against the grain, he really doesn't have any good idea of who might be in position to get in that throwing lane because he's running pretty much at top speed anyway. And most coaches would tell you, you got by with it. And I don't doubt that he heard that after he threw it. You got by with it, but just for the record, that was a questionable decision on your part to throw the ball back against the grain. So I guess the one thing that comes to mind for me, does he have any weakness to his game? Maybe it's possible that the high level of confidence he plays at might create a situation in which he makes a foolish decision about fitting the ball into a tight spot. I'll give you another example. Just a week ago, it was a beautiful throw for a touchdown. You remember the ball that was thrown down the field? There were actually two defenders that were pretty nearby. The ball split those two defenders. Maybe the only reason he got by with it is one of those defenders did not see the ball. He had his back turned to the ball. He was trying to locate locate the receiver. And the ball went through a very tight seam for a touchdown. It was a beautiful throw. But if that player would have simply had his eyes back toward the quarterback, he very, very well might have been in position to make a play on it. And as you know, our guys are more likely to be looking at the ball than looking at any receiver down the field.
We saw Ethan Hurkett last week drop back in coverage, make a huge pick. You could argue game-saving pick. I mean, that was obviously Marshall Meter's kick was huge, but Hurkett's play was probably the play of the game. They don't win that game without Ethan Hurkett's heroics in coverage.
And truthfully, we're not even guaranteed to go to overtime if he doesn't make that play because there's still a few seconds left, and they might have gotten in position for a game-winning field goal. A huge play. You're right. Absolutely true.
Although we've talked about throwing the kitchen sink and trying to generate explosive plays in one form or another, and it'll help having Caleb Brown and Deontay Vines if they're healthy. But as a former quarterbacks coach, Don, what would you tell Deacon Hill? Because Deacon is the starter, regardless of if you think Marco Blanes should get a few snaps in this game. They're not trotting out Marco as the starter unless something happens to Deacon Hill during this week of preparation. So as a quarterbacks coach, how can you cool a guy's nerves, especially a guy who hasn't played a lot of games? I know he's, started in 6 or 7 games this year, but in general, we've seen him in some games look like he's playing a little nervous, throwing a lot of, he still has the tendency to throw high and hot a lot.
Right.
How do you get him to go into this game calm and ready for the moment? He's been at Wisconsin. He's been at Nebraska, but what we're going to see Saturday is going to be somewhat unprecedented and against probably the best defense he's faced.
Yeah. Well, I would say it kind of reminds me a little bit of when Joey Labus had to play. After Spencer was injured a year ago, I made the comment then, we should not expect greatness out of Joey Labus, because he simply hadn't played much. But what we can expect, and this is really all Joey has to do for us, Joey doesn't need to make a bunch of amazing plays. More importantly, he just needs to make all the routine plays, make the plays that he should make. No different than making the chip shot field goal that we should make, or not dropping a pass that a defensive back has a chance to intercept. Don't drop it, catch it. You're in position to make the play. Make the play. It's a routine play. Just catch the ball. So that applies to Deacon also. Deacon doesn't need to make a lot of incredible plays. What would be more beneficial on his part would be simply to make all those plays that he should make, all the routine throws and catches that should be made. If he could just make all those, that would go a long way to playing winning football. And obviously not make bad plays. If we can protect the ball, if we can play all day with over, we have a good chance to win the game. No doubt about it. That's not true just in this game. That's true in every Big Ten game that's ever been played this year. The team that wins on turnovers has a really good chance to win the game.
Don, are you going to make it by the Beef House on the way out to Indy?
Well, I'm tempted to. I don't know that we'll make it Not on the way in, I don't believe, but on the way back, maybe. Maybe on.
So you're heading home on Sunday.
Yeah.
Okay. We can talk more about this off the air, but I'm curious if anybody knows about the Beef House on your trips trips out east, right? On 74, whenever you'd drive on 74, you'd always at the top of the Beef House is the old thing.
We used to play every other year at Indiana State when I was at Western.
Okay, Western.
And the tradition was to go to the Beef House, and I don't honestly recall. Of course, to Purdue, we typically, in the Big Ten, we flew. We didn't bus.
Okay.
I think the only time I saw the Beef House with a football team was our teams at Western. But I do remember one year at halftime, we were not playing particularly well in Terre Haute, and I did mention to the players, you know what, we don't have to go to the Beef House after the game. If this game doesn't work out, we can simply make a stop at McDonald's and we get home a little quicker in that way. And it's amazing. For some odd reason, we played a lot better in the second half. I believe the Beef House had something to do with it.
Good old Beef House. Okay, Don, final thing from me. I know you're not a predictions guy. Neither you or me are gambling guys. We don't bet on sports, and I'll never bet on sports. But, I mean, right now, the odds makers have Iowa as at least 3 touchdown underdogs in this game.
Right.
And Kirk, we heard from him yesterday during his media availability. He has clearly embraced being an underdog, and he was an underdog 2 years ago. I don't remember what the line was 2 years ago, but it wasn't this stark.
I think it was maybe 11 points, 12 points, something like that.
With all of what we've talked about and keys to competing in this game and having a chance, what do you actually think is going to happen in this game? You don't have to give me a score prediction, but what do you actually think is going to happen?
Well, I expect both sides will have an inspired effort. Both sides will play championship football. Think back to the Rutgers game. That's the best example. After that game, I did say, I believe on your show, I said it. We played like a championship football team today. Rutgers can be a difficult opponent, and yet we were good on offense, good on defense, and good in the kicking game. We were 3 for 3. When you're 3 for 3, you win the game convincingly, 22-0 in that case. I would expect that we will play well on both sides. I do think that our offense, as much as we struggled, talking about trends right now, Corey, you have to say our running game is trending up a little bit with how we've played. I think the offensive line's definitely gotten better over the past month. Our backs do know how to run and pick up the hard yards. And for that matter, talking about their running game versus us, one thing we've done well all season long is defend the run. So it's not going to be easy for Michigan just to run through us. I don't think that's going to happen. We've done a good job defending against all kinds of good rushing attacks. So I think we're going to really play well and play hard on both sides of the ball. I think we'll play well in the kicking game. The one thing I do fear, the same thing you mentioned, that did happen to us to some degree 2 years ago, is it conceivable we'll just get worn down on defense simply because we're out there too long on defense and not out there enough on offense? That's a possibility, no doubt about it, because Michigan's not your average team. Michigan may very well be playing for the national championship in a few short weeks. They're very good. It's a tough assignment. So the question is, can we be a little bit better about getting on and off the field on defense? Can we improve in that area by being a little bit better to force them to punt? And at the same time, can we be a little bit better on offense to make a few more critical down conversions and do a better job of staying on the field than we did 2 years ago? We need to do both those. We need to be a little better on critical downs than we've been. That hasn't been our strength this year on offense, that's for sure. We're one of the worst at converting on 3rd and long, our general. But one thing that's helped us recently is we've had a little better percentage of 3rd and short, 3rd and medium than 3rd and long that we had earlier in the season. So if we can avoid 3rd and long, that'll help, because Michigan's certainly going to be a difficult defense to go and get against, regardless of the yardage need necessary on 3rd down. So if we can do that and end up with time of possession similar to Michigan's, that'll help us. What is difficult to deal with, and a prime example would be the Penn State game. Our defense did a masterful job of preventing big plays, and that's part of the game. The one area where we really struggled, we could not get off the field on 3rd down defensively. And offensively, of course, to make it worse, we couldn't convert on third down.
Yeah.
And that's where you get the huge discrepancy on snaps. If Michigan has a 15 or 20 play edge on snaps, then we are in a lot of trouble because it's going to be difficult to win if we have to play defense that much of the game.
Am I a fool? Well, let's just stop there. Michigan fans will say, yes, you are. But Don, am I a fool in thinking that Iowa does have a chance in this game? I mean, obviously,
Sure
they don't.
Sure we do. Absolutely we do. Think it back this way about it. If you want to think back Kirk's 25 years, or for that matter, Kirk and Hayden's 45 years, how many times have we beaten somebody that we were not even supposed to beat? That's the beauty of college football. That's why people pay to show up and watch, because they don't know what's going to happen. And it's so meaningful when you can be part of that experience, whether you're a player or a fan. Let's face it, it means a lot to the fans to be able to experience that kind of game too. And we've had any number of those games through Kirk's 25 years. And maybe, just maybe, this is one of them again on Saturday night.
Well, I'm going to look forward to it, Don. You and I will both be there in different places in that stadium. It is an experience, I'm sure, like none other. You've been through the experience before. I have not, so I'm looking forward to it from that perspective. We'll, of course, have post-game coverage right here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. I don't know exactly when that post-game show is going to start yet, because I don't know exactly what some of the post-game obligations will be like following the actual game. And, of course, the game starts at 7:15 p.m. Central Time on Fox, which is 8:15 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox.
Would it be wrong, Corey, for us to at least make the statement there will be a post-game show on Saturday night? Can we say that or no?
We can absolutely say that. There will be a post-game show on Saturday night. And
well, I'm sure you feel like I do. We owe it to our fans to be able to offer them that opportunity to talk about the game. And I know I have huge loyalty to our listening audience, and I know you do too.
And I want nothing more than for Iowa to beat Michigan on Saturday night for so many reasons. But I think it would just be a sweet, sweet taste after what we had to deal with 2 years ago, and just everything involved. I don't think there's any question, Don. I'd be surprised if that late score in that 42-3 win hasn't been at least thought about. Maybe he hasn't brought it up to his team, but my guess is that Kirk, at least that's ran through his mind, right? You're not going to dwell on that, but as a competitor, doesn't that run through your mind a bit?
Well, it hadn't just run through Kirk's mind. It's run through the minds of those players, too, because they haven't forgotten. Yep. I'll promise you they remember that, too. Here's one last parting thought. Let's not forget that Jim Harbaugh has had trouble with Iowa off and on for the last 38 years. He was the guy taking snaps in that 85 game, of course. And I'm pretty sure he hadn't forgotten that one. So we've been a thorn in their side more than once, in his side more than once. We'll see if we can do it one more time.
And a couple of topics we didn't hit just for sake of time. You know, Blake Corum's one of the best players in the country. That tandem with him and Donovan Edwards is going to be hard to contain.
I have great respect for both those guys. They know how to run the football.
And Jim Harbaugh hasn't coached the last 3 games in person, so he's coming off a suspension for the cheating allegations. So a lots to mull over the next few days. But Don, I've enjoyed this season. We're not done yet. We've got post-game coverage after the championship game, and then we'll have bowl game coverage as well. Thank you once again for sitting down with me, and we'll hope we're talking about something very surprising on the national college football level on Saturday night.
Well, let me close with those Michigan fans that are listening. I have great respect for Michigan football because I've been involved with games against Michigan for a long, long time. And I like the way that Michigan plays. They play a lot like we do. They play good, sound, fundamental football. I think they do have great character on the football team, just as we do. And it's never easy to find a way to beat the Wolves, that's for sure.
All right, folks, for Coach Don Patterson, I'm Corey Brada. This has been our Big Ten Championship game preview. We are week 230 of Brada's Branded Thoughts here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. We will talk to you very soon and talk to you after the game Saturday night.